This week's Torah portion is called Vayishlach, and we read in it about our forefather Jacob, who, having fled from his father's home after having deceived his father and taken the firstborn blessing that was meant for Esau, he runs away on the command of his mother, and he goes and he lives with his uncle Lavan. And we're now 34 years later, and Jacob is returning back to his home, back to where he doesn't know what he's going to encounter when he goes home. He comes with him with his wives, with his flocks, with his wealth, and he's afraid because he knows he's going to meet up with Esau, and he doesn't know what Esau's state of mind is. So he sends ahead some angels, some malachim, some messengers to go and check out what the story is with Esau, who's coming to meet him. He finds out that Esau is coming with 400 soldiers or 400 men, and he's frightened. And he does a few different things to prepare for the encounter that he's going to have with his brother Esau. He separates his camp into two different camps so that if Esau was to attack one camp, there would still be a second camp that would survive and that could escape and to continue on. He brings many gifts. He has a lot of gifts that he's going to give to Esau as a way to appease his brother if his brother's angry with him. And the third thing he does is he prays. He prays to God, and he prays, evoking his grandfather Abraham and his father Isaac, and he prays for what he wants. He speaks out what it is that he wants, and he thanks God for all of the kindnesses that God has done. And as he's separating his camp into two, he finds himself alone, and it's nighttime, and he's alone. It's very important that he's alone, and he struggles with a man. It says in the Torah that he struggles with a man, that he has a fight with a man that is known by all our commentators to be an angel that represents Esau. He's the angel of Esau, that he represents evil in the world, that there's a struggle with Jacob, who represents good, with the evil of Esau. There's an existential struggle of good against evil. And that's one of the interpretations of what this struggle all night, in the nighttime, which represents a murkiness and not really clearly understanding what's going on. There's a cloudiness to the truth and to knowing what's right and wrong, that Jacob represents truth and righteousness in the world, is struggling against this man that represents evil in the world. And there's this ongoing struggle that happens all through the night. And at the end, Jacob doesn't let go. Even though he wins the fight, he doesn't let go. So one interpretation is that he's struggling against the forces of evil in the world. Rabbi Sachs speaks about Jacob struggling with his own inner sense of self. Who is Jacob? And Rabbi Sachs expounds upon an idea that Jacob, for much of his life, has wanted to be, or has aspects of, Esau that make up his character, that he wants to be Esau, that when he was a baby with his twin brother in utero, that they were fighting in utero, that there was a struggle going on in the womb even before they were born. And when they're born, Esau, the firstborn, comes out first, and then Jacob comes up the rear, and he's holding on to the heel of his brother. He wants to follow his brother, he wants to be his brother, he wants to go with his brother, holding on to the heel of his brother Esau. Later, we read that he buys the birthright from Esau. Again, it's Esau's birthright that he buys. He also dresses up in Esau's clothing to deceive his father, to then get the blessing that was meant for Esau. And he describes himself in that encounter with his father, I am Esau. So that Rabbi Sachs suggests, as do other commentators, that there was a Jacob wanting to be Esau, not owning his own self, not being himself, not being solidly Jacob, that there was a sense that he wanted to be Esau, that he was an Esau wannabe, that he wanted to be like his older brother. His older brother is described as being loved by his father. He wanted his father's love. Perhaps he wanted to be Esau, and perhaps he was struggling internally with not being comfortable with who he was and wanting to be somebody else, wanting to be Esau. And so he struggles with that existential sense of self. That's part of what the struggle is. And he overcomes that he lets go of being Esau, and he can then truly own being Jacob. So that's another interpretation of what this struggle with the angel is. And he struggles with the hardships and all the difficulties that his life has been up until now, where he wanted to marry Rachel. She was the one that he loved, and Laban switched the sisters and put the older sister Leah in her stead, and he ends up marrying Leah instead of Rachel and having to work longer and staying longer to marry Rachel, that he had to flee his father's home, that he didn't have his father's love. He's not had an easy life. He struggles with the vicissitudes of life, as do we all. We all struggle. Where is God? Why did God do this to me? What do I understand? How do I become whole? How do I own me? How do I live life and know that God is with me all the time and that God is good, even when the going is tough? And Jacob, in this struggle with the man, is struggling against all of these forces. Finally, say our commentators, is also struggling against negativity, a negative side of us that exists inside of us that says, no, don't do that. Don't do the right thing. Go this way, not that way. This internal battle we have between doing the right thing and not doing the right thing that happens inside of us, that he's struggling against that. So this sense of struggle that Jacob has with this man is a struggle that we have to this day. At the end of the night, the sun is rising, and the angel says, I have to go now. I have to praise God. It's time for me to leave. And Jacob holds on to the angel and won't let the angel go. Says, no, I won't let you go until you bless me. And the angel blesses Jacob and says, your name will no longer be Jacob, but you will also be called, not that his name is replaced, but it will also be called Yisrael, because you have struggled against God and man, and you have prevailed. You have overcome. You have held on and not given up. And you, Jacob, now Yisrael, will be the beginning of what's going to come. We are considered, we who exist today are the B'nai Yisrael. We are the children of Israel because we hold that name. We are a people and we are individuals who struggle and overcome. That is our history, to struggle, that we are still here against all odds, that as much as we have to figure out who we are existentially, and as much as we have to fight against the forces of evil in the world, and we have to struggle against our own inner wholeness, that we will prevail because we have that name Yisrael. And it's very interesting that the word for name in Hebrew is a shem, and the word for our neshama is neshama. So the neshama, the soul, has the name inside of it, meaning that our name represents who we are, is the essence of who we are. And so when we are considered the B'nai Yisrael, we are bringing with us that description of a people who struggle with God and man and overcome, and that's who we are. So Jacob leaves this encounter with this bracha, with this blessing. The angel strikes him on his thigh, and he ends up limping. And it could be a metaphor. I've seen it put out that it's a metaphor for when we struggle, that it takes a while till we can incorporate that into ourselves and become whole again, that we limp for a little bit. He does get healed later on, but he leaves the encounter limping. We leave our struggles limping. But Jacob leaves this struggle having left the Esau that he wanted to be, left that, and now he's a new man. He's more comfortable with who he is. And when he encounters Esau, he says to Esau, I have everything. Not I have what I have wealth, or I have this. I have everything. I have everything I need. Like, I don't need any more than I have. Everything I have is enough. It's what I am meant to have, and that's what I have, and I have everything. There's nothing that I don't have that I need. And I think that's a lesson for us all, to look around and say, what is it that I have? I have everything. To be able to say I have everything and really mean that. So Jacob walks away from this encounter. He's limping. He's brushed off the Esau in him. And the end of the Torah portion, I want to bring it back to the end of the Torah portion where we read about the death of Rachel. So Rachel is Jacob's beloved wife, and also Leah is his wife, but he loved Rachel. So Rachel had the love of her husband, but she had very difficult time bearing children. And Leah, the other wife, had children, but she did not have the love of the husband Jacob. So it's a little bit of an inverse, that Rachel had the love, but not the children, and Leah had the children, but not the love. Rachel dies in childbirth on the road. It's her second child. She's born Joseph, and now she's dying in childbirth with her second child, who she names Ben-Oni, child of my affliction. Jacob changes the name to Benjamin, child of my right hand, of my right side, of my strength, but it's named a separate name. But Rachel, we know her as our foremother. She is known as Rachel Imenu, our mother. She sacrificed herself for this child. She wanted children so badly. She prayed for children. She said to husband Jacob, if I don't have children, it's as if I'm dead. Her whole focus was on having children and wanting to take care of the children and sacrifice herself for the children and cry for the children and pray for the children and pray to have children. So we call her Rachel Imenu, and she wanted to be buried on the road. She wouldn't want to get buried in the cave of Machpelah with Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebekah. And later Jacob and Leah are buried in that cave along with the other patriarchs and matriarchs. And Rachel is buried along the road to Bethlehem, because she knew that in the future the Jewish people are going to be exiled from Jerusalem and they're going to travel along the road in their exile, and she'll be there to cry for them, to pray for them, to advocate them, to be with them in their travails. And so Rachel is the quintessential mother in that she prays and sacrifices herself for her children. And so maybe the theme of this week's Torah portion is, if we take these two stories alone, as like a sense of self-acceptance, a self-knowledge, a self of to thyself be true. Who was Rachel? Who was Rachel? She was the mother, even though she didn't have a lot of children, and even though she didn't actually mother her children very long, she is considered the mother of the Jewish people. And who is Jacob? Jacob is the man who struggled and overcame and became Yisrael. And we are the Bnei Yisrael. We are the children of Israel. So my blessing to us is that we hopefully don't have so many struggles. And when we do have struggles, that we overcome them, that we can be genuine to ourselves and authentically ourselves and be comfortable with who we are, and that we can, in the periods of nighttime and aloneness, we can understand who we are and be able to be ourselves and not wish we're somebody else, and overcome all the fears and the forces of negativity, and walk away, hopefully not limping, but walking strongly and with much light into the world.